Mm-hmm. Says it's streaming live now.
Yeah, it's still setting up, redirecting to Facebook Live page.
Oh, okay.
Hello, everybody. How are you? So we are live. I'm now live with Paul Dummett. We're a little bit early, so I'm just setting things up at the moment.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for coming.
So yeah, this is the first in a series of interviews on first in the series of interviews in the National Geographic Learning's Teaching Through Crisis series, focusing on supporting learners from refugee backgrounds. So yeah, in the first one, we've got quite a lot of different nice interviews for you coming up. But we'll tell you about, I don't want to say too much now because it's not quite 3 o'clock. Just want to get into the swing. If you are here, it would be nice to just in the comments say hello, who are you? There is a little bit of a delay. We've got about, I think me and myself and Paul are maybe 30 seconds ahead of you. So we might take a little bit longer to read your comments. And if you're getting it on catch up, just feel free to add your comments as you go. I think they'll still be available. Okay, so we are bang on 3 o'clock now. So welcome everybody. Thanks so much for coming. So this is, my name is Emily Bryson. I have been teaching people from refugee backgrounds since about 2007 at a further education college in Glasgow. I've also done secondments with the Scottish Refugee Council, doing a peer education project, which got students, linked up students with the local community. I've also worked with the Scottish Government, advising them on their ESOL policy and a few various other roles in my time. And Paul, would you like to introduce you? So sorry, I'll just introduce the series first. So this is part of a series of interviews with experts in the field of teaching and working with people from refugee backgrounds. It's part of our Teaching Through Crisis series. And we want to provide teachers with support and lessons for anybody who is working with people from refugee backgrounds. So that includes people who have faced forced migration or asylum seekers or refugees really from around the world. Okay, so Paul, would you like to introduce yourself and your experiences of working with people from refugee backgrounds?
Sure. I don't have quite the length of experience you do. I'm a teacher and writer based in Oxford in the UK. And writing is my day job, my kind of bread and butter, if you like. But I've always remained a teacher at heart. And through the pandemic, I've been teaching more and more, a lot of online classes to refugees based here in Oxford, also to some refugees, children in Palestine, but I'll talk about that a little bit later, which I've been doing for longer, in fact. But the people I teach here in Oxford are people who've come from Syria, the Syrian crisis and all the associated nationalities that came as part of that, Kurdish people as well. More recently, groups of Afghan students who were brought to the country after the crisis there and sort of put in hotels, a lot of them still in hotels here, in fact, waiting to be placed into accommodation, proper accommodation. And various other nationalities, an Ethiopian most recently, which is very interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, so teaching online, teaching through Zoom, where we are today, or via Facebook, and sometimes group teaching, sometimes one-to-one teaching. Yeah, and it's been quite a learning experience for me as well. Yeah, particularly the Zoom side of it, I guess everyone has experienced, really. Yeah, it has its own challenges and interests, really. Yeah.
And the Zoom side of things has been quite recent, I suppose, has it?
Yes, it has. Yeah, it has. And I think yeah, does it have advantages? Some, but not many. Not many that I can think of. It's more something to be kind of managed and got on top of than something to be championed, I would have thought. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I'll start off with what do you think teachers should be aware of when teaching students from refugee backgrounds?
Yeah, I think the main thing is that each person, one sort of interesting thing, when I used to travel much more than I do now, I'm probably sort of, if I look back 2-3 years, I always used to remember when I came back into the country, we have a bus service between the airports, the London airports, Heathrow and Gatwick Airport and Oxford. And it's only run by one company, so they're a little bit complacent there, and they're not very friendly to to people as they first get on the bus. I always remember the driver, I always had to speak to the drivers sometimes saying, can you just be a little bit more welcoming? So they gruffly ask people where they want to get off. So they can put their bags in the right place in the hold, the thing, and just expecting people to know, to have information about them. And I always thought this was incredibly, as an experience of a first contact of a British person, this was terrible thing. It just gave a terrible impression. And I think that's absolutely true with refugees, that each person that they come into contact, each sort of interaction they have, will affect their sense of well-being and their kind of sense of stability, kind of normality even, I guess. And so I guess the main principle for me, the main thing to be aware of, is just to make those connections that you have with students as warm and as human as possible. That would be my kind of underlying principle. Yeah.
To kind of welcome learners as much as possible.
Yes. Yeah.
I often find that the ESOL classroom is, because we both teach in the UK, and actually the rest of the Teaching Through Crisis series, we're going to interview people working in refugee camps, people who work for support organisations, people working with young learners. So actually this is just the first in the series, and Paul and I both work in the UK. Yeah, I think partly also building the social connections of learners and getting them out and about and building them their confidence with the local community as well. Yeah, I'm not sure.
I might have lost Emily there.
Yeah, I think you froze a little bit, or was it me that froze?
I'm still moving. It says my internet connection is unstable.
Oh, right, okay.
Did you lose me?
Well,
vice versa?
No, just you froze, but I think that was when I was talking, so I think we're really okay.
Okay, good.
Yeah, I think you're so right about being welcoming to the students and creating a welcoming atmosphere, because a lot of them have maybe experienced trauma, they're missing their families, they don't know what's happening to their families or their friends. So the ESOL classroom can also be, because it can be quite isolating when you come over to a new country and a new place. The ESOL classroom can quite often be the place where they build their friendships and build their own social networks and connect with people who maybe speak their own language as well, not just the unfamiliar new language of the country that they've moved to. No,
I think that's right. There's that whole sort of sense of instability they have, and I kind of, that's the thing I felt most, I think, is just that thing of being maybe a constant in their lives, or a point of stability or something. I don't know, I've never asked them that, but I've always kind of tried to provide that, just to be sort of steady and calm and easy and patient and warm. And I
guess teachers can often be the first point of contact for, oh, what should I do in this situation?
There's some
lots
of
of signposting. And
sure. Good.
And what would your top tips be then to people who are new to supporting learners from these backgrounds?
Okay, I think the first thing that I always try and do is to kind of gently help them to tell their own story, and so there's no hurry about that. Little bits of it might come out little by little, but I think it's very important for them to be able to do that, to be able to talk about their background, where they come from, not necessarily to talk about how they got here, because that's very traumatic in some cases, but just to talk about their own lives before, and to talk about their own personal story and where they want to be as well. And I tend to do that using other life stories or
Mm-hmm.
other stories in general, in fact. So the Ethiopian woman I'm teaching at the moment has an incredibly low level of English.
Mm-hmm.
What did we look at? We looked at the story, Nelson Mandela's life story, Bob Marley, because she comes from Ethiopia. And Bob Marley's dream was always to return to Ethiopia, and she knew of Bob Marley.
Okay.
And sometimes I do it through using banknotes, like characters on coins or banknotes that they'll be familiar with, and they try and tell me the story of those people. So once we've got that kind of language of stages of people's careers or lives, was born in, grew up here and so on like that, and then we transfer it to their own lives. So I just think that's very important. And I know some people say, or often the association I work with, which is called Asylum Welcome, it always says be very careful, tread very carefully when it comes to talking about family or how
Mm-hmm.
they got here, or I do sympathize with that a bit, but I think those subjects can be dealt with in a very sensitive way.
Mm-hmm.
Try and encourage them to talk, but without ever forcing them. Just let them tell you as much as they want to tell you. And I find, for the most part, I find that they really do want to talk about those things, and it's important for them. It's important for them to have that narrative kind of ready to hand to explain to people. So that's one thing, to think about their practical needs as well. And I'm sure you've been doing a lot of that in the years you've been teaching, the things of accessing health, education, transport, and all that sort of thing. But at the same time, to give an outlet for their feelings and ideas, perhaps via kind of human stories that they can comment on. So much the stuff we often do in language classrooms, so it might be, I don't know, an article about a guy who did random acts of kindness or something, or a piece about an intercultural marriage. And then they sort of get into, discussing those kinds of things, and their own kind of views and values come out as well, which is interesting. Yeah,
and it can be quite interesting getting them, if you've got a multicultural class from all over the world, it can be really quite interesting getting them to talk about all the different,
absolutely,
their own different cultures and
And lastly, I guess my last tip would just be to try and include some humor where you can. So incidental humor. I often do one thing about asking them to tell typical jokes from their country, because I always think it's quite a good insight into a culture.
And do you think they translate quite well when you do jokes?
Not always.
Not always. No, but it can be quite funny the way that they can be, that they don't necessarily work. It can be quite interesting and funny.
Yeah, they never get British jokes. I tell that one about about why is Switzerland such a great country, and then I show them a picture of the Swiss flag, which is basically a white cross on a red background. And the answer is, I don't know, but the flag is a big plus. And they just don't get that at all. So you have to explain things sometimes. So, and you may get some black humor back as well, but that's absolutely fine. Yeah, that's good.
International humor.
Yeah. I think that's important. Yeah. Good.
Yeah. And you mentioned briefly about topics to avoid or broach carefully. Would there be any other ones? Family is something I always tread lightly with, and kind of offer adaptations.
So family, I do a little bit. I find just anything kind of, I guess what I call indulgent, I just steer away from. So things like the kind of things you get in course about foreign holidays, about fashion, luxurious homes. It just always seems to be completely the wrong tone. Really,
because they're quite often, well, certainly my students are low incomes. They can be quite worried about what's happening. They wouldn't necessarily be prioritizing their English class over what's actually happening in their life. Like maybe if they're more concerned about having a roof over their heads or how their family are getting on back in their home country.
Exactly. And even if they did enjoy those things, they're certainly not now. That's often, often the way. So those kind of things. So so teaching furniture, I'd just show a picture of quite a plain room or a simple room. That kind of thing. Yeah. Just be very conscious of as I say, anything that seems kind of indulgent or over consumerist, really. And yes, people do say be careful of subjects like family and how they got here. I just sort of tread carefully. But,
yeah. I mean, yeah, I definitely include it, but I'd always kind of give some students, if they don't want to speak about it, it's kind of the same as like teaching anything, really. You need to put the student at the heart of it, and if they're not keen on talking about that particular thing, then don't force it, just as you would in any other class, I suppose.
No, I think that's right. It's just yes, with refugees, your radar just probably needs to be turned up that much. More strongly. Yeah.
And then you actually have, so my experience is predominantly teaching adults from refugee backgrounds, and yours, you taught quite a lot of young learners as well.
Yeah, I've been working for many more years now, sort of 4 or 5 years now, with young learners from Palestine. It was sort of interesting as a case of refugees, because they are in refugee camps, but their parents might have been there for 40 years, and they've been there all their lives, and they know nothing else. But their level of deprivation, sort of access to sort of basic services like electricity, water, stuff like that, is these are mostly kids in Gaza, in Palestine, is the same as anyone in a refugee camp anywhere. They live sort of lives of quite severe privation, and worse than that, really, their opportunities to, or the prospects of them actually escaping that situation, are extremely small. They can't travel, they have no identity papers, they can't escape Gaza. They're basically in a kind of prison, really. And so that experience of it's a kind of different thing from the thing from what we've been talking about, because perhaps the thing that's most important to them is just the sense that they've got, or the reality, in fact, they've got a window onto the outside world, but this sense that there's people on the outside world who are caring about them, who are interested in their situation, and that kind of recognition is incredibly important to them. So I teach grade 6 to 11 kids in Palestine, and it's sort of speaking skills. They have a separate English language program, a curriculum, quite a strict curriculum, which I think they sometimes get involved in, but not too much. I tend to provide the lighter-hearted kind of side, like extra English club kind of thing, where we do speaking skills, just where they can listen to a native speaker, then storytelling skills, and also some advocacy skills. So there's one group who are they're sort of designated to be future ambassadors for Palestine. I've done a couple of sessions with them, who are sort of training to be advocates, as it were, to defend their cause, their situation. To the world. And they, my goodness, they're impressive. They're very impressive young, sort of 16, 17-year-olds. Yeah.
And did you say that you connect other classes up to that particular?
Yes, we also do that. So
they're meeting for people from all over the world.
Yeah. So with that group, there's an online intercultural communication course, and we tend to, so we connect groups, we connect Palestinian students to students in other countries, and they tend to be kind of poorer, or the countries often with similar situations like Venezuela, where services are also, even though the kids aren't refugees, the services are very sort of intermittent and life is quite difficult. Bosnia as well. Teach into Ukraine now. We've had quite a lot of Ukrainians join those groups. So yeah, it seems to attract people in a kind of similar situation. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so good just to kind of create those natural opportunities for language use, really, or language acquisition, by giving them something to want to ask because they're meeting somebody new, and they're in a really natural way to practice English.
It's amazing. And their ability to want to communicate across cultures, or their openness, is quite a lesson for adults, really, just how naturally open they are, and how naturally enthusiastic they are about communicating their own situation, their ideas to other nationalities. It's
Yeah,
it's kind of actually I'm speaking about this at IATEFL, I think, about this experience, about what lessons I've learned from teaching kids, lessons in intercultural communication I've learned from the children themselves, because it's really, because intercultural communication very much about openness, and they just naturally have it. They naturally have that. Yeah, been fascinating.
Are we allowed any spoilers to the IATEFL talk?
Not particularly, no.
No.
No. I hope to show some video if I can get permission from that's what's quite difficult sometimes when you're doing Zoom classes. You have to go to parents for permission to, so that's what I'm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
I'll look out for that when I'm there.
Okay.
Another question to talk about, what do you think young learners need that's a little bit different to adults?
Yeah, I mean, I think the obvious thing is kind of, I think there are two things. One is distraction, really.
Yeah.
Distraction and fun, I suppose I would say, which
both
of themselves are what you're trying to do is a kind of normalization. You're trying to. Sometimes adults will be, they've been so struck by what's happened to them that they've gone into a slightly sort of stone-like state. They're kind of numb, really. A Kurdish student that's particularly true of, who just zones in and out, really, because of the trauma that he's been through. And I think the kids, in a funny way, are somehow more. I say more is they don't get into that kind of state, but I think some of them might be deep down be traumatized. And I think it's just that whole idea, and it's particularly true of the Palestinian kids, just desperately just want to be like other kids, just to have the same opportunities, the same things that other kids enjoy. So to be children, basically, let's face it, that's all it is. So I just try and inject as much fun as I can, or as is possible, using games, using sort of activities that they will find, like competitions and things like that will just make them forget. Yeah.
Give them a little hour where they don't need to think about it.
Yeah, exactly. Because they're kids who've been forced to face really serious issues, really serious things, just way before they should have been, really, before anyone should be, really. But way before they should have been, certainly. Not always. And
I guess their parents or their guardians or whoever they're living with at that time are probably a bit more focused on things like housing and money, but they've still experienced that same trauma and the same difficulties.
And you see it. I was watching something the other day with Ukrainian kids in Poland, and how they'd been already. Poland's been fantastic at integrating the refugees so quickly, and how they were. I think they were joining it was like a karate club or something like that, and there was another one showing kids playing football, and just how for those hours that they were doing those activities, it obviously just forgot their troubles. They were just completely into it, and they just looked like any other kid in any situation. Good. So it's that injection of fun and distraction, really.
Good. And how would you do that? What activities? Have you got any activity ideas for teachers?
I often build lessons around. I got this from working with the Hands Up project, this Palestinian charity. And I often build lessons around short stories and fables, particularly. Fables, it sounds a bit sort of moralistic, and I always think when people mention fables, they think of Aesop and sort of lessons your parents taught you, share things and don't do something. But actually, I found a lot of fables. I sort of trawled the internet for ages looking for fables that might be sort of fun and interesting, with good messages. And I found quite a few now. And then, so they're always shortish, and I base a lesson around that. And I try to find like a vocabulary or a grammar or a functional language point that I can draw on or draw out of it, and build a bit of learning around it. Or it could even be a pronunciation theme. around it. And then the stories themselves kind of lend themselves in two ways really to language learning. One, because they can often be quite formulaic and repetitive, particularly fables. And so that gives a kind of framework, a natural framework and a sort of memorable framework for language that the students can easily get their heads round. So we do a lot of retelling activities. Perhaps I'll retell and I'll be the narrator and I'll ask them to be the characters in the story, or I'll ask one of the students, if I feel more confident or in their ability to do so, to be the narrator, and then the other ones will act the parts of each character or something in the story. I'll try and give you an example of one, and I try and build in language learning. So like a very simple one about questions that you ask some people when you first meet them, like what's your name, where are you from, do you have any brothers and sisters, that sort of thing. So I build that into a story about the boy who cried wolf. I think everybody knows the story of the boy who cried wolf, little boy who's told to go up into the hills and look after the sheep. And he gets rather bored while he's doing that, and so that's when he starts to call wolf, wolf, and all the people running from the village, and there's no wolf. So when he goes, I do this as a kind of collaborative storytelling. So he goes up into the hills and he gets bored, and then I call on the students to ask. So he turns to a sheep and he asks them a question. He says to the first sheep, "What's your name?" And the sheep goes, "Meh," like this. And then I'll call on the students to ask other questions. So they'll say, "Where are you from?" Like this. I'll try and prompt these questions, and each time I'll just go "Meh" in return, like that. So, and they like that. That's fun. That's an example. I just kind of build in, some element of language learning to the story. Yeah. And then retell it and stuff.
That sounds like a fun and humorous thing to do over Zoom as well.
No, it works for Zoom. I think collaborative things like that work for Zoom. I think a lot of I do use breakout rooms, and I do get them sort of preparing things sometimes in breakout rooms, but I tend less and less. I tend to kind of abandon those in favor of more group and collaborative, activities across the room, as it were. So
I guess part of the challenge can be having minimal resources if you're not teaching online. So and having things like that where you really exploit a text by role playing it, and all the activities that you mentioned there are really exploiting that fable as much as you possibly can.
Exactly. So I've done a couple of those now. I think they should be online, perhaps on the National Geographic, a couple of stories, with a language learning point attached to them, just as little 15-minute lessons. I've done a couple for this kind of, not for this series, but for the refugee support effort that National Geographic is doing.
So there's Teaching Through Crisis lessons. So there's a website on the National Geographic Learning website. I'll put a link to it actually in the chat. And these lessons, so Paul has written one of them. I'm just noticing all the comments now. I was thinking everybody was being very quiet. Now I'm seeing them all. So there's a whole load of bite-sized lessons. Paul's created some. There's going to be more added, and we're going to continue to do these lives and interviews with lots of different people. We're going to be interviewing Alex Palinak about trauma-informed practice, Catherine Bilnsborough about teaching, supporting not learners that have experience of refugee matters, but students in a classroom maybe who want to find out a bit more about those, about that, finding different lesson ideas for that. What other topics have we got coming up? We have loads. Teaching young learners, and then we're going to just try and get as many amazing speakers as we can. So we will keep you informed about those over the coming weeks. We've also got Laura Agbasso, who is an ESOL teacher in Cardiff, who originally came over as an asylum seeker I don't know how long ago, but she's an amazing speaker. So I'm very excited about interviewing everybody coming up. Were there any questions? Well, I suppose we've got maybe 1 minute, but there's maybe time to just kind of quickly skim over to see if there's any questions. Not yet, but yeah, watch this space for more. Thank you so much for coming on, Paul. Anything
really
you would like to add as a final?
No, I think it's a great initiative, and I think there should be more of this. I think it's fantastic, and it'd be lovely to hear from people, and their own opinions, really, and own tips and techniques.
Yes, absolutely.
I realize everyone will have a different situation, and everything must be adapted to the situation. That's obviously perhaps the thing that should always be said. It's always about, all these things are about an individual's personal situation and how what's happened to them and how they're feeling as a result. The whole thing has to be very adaptive, so it'd be brilliant to hear what other people's experiences are.
So please get in touch, please make comments, please like this page so that you can get updates on the next sessions, and keep an eye out for us updating the Teaching Through Crisis lessons and National Geographic part of the website. So thanks for coming, Paul. And
Emily, thank you very much. Really always good to see you. Thank you. All right.
Thanks.
Bye everybody. Bye.